broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jason Thomasy. I'm the Vice President of Greenleaf HR. I want to let everybody know you guys are in muted status. The question box should be open, so we will open this up at the end of our webinar to be able to ask questions that we can potentially answer for you. I am joined by Rick Lindsey, which happens to be our banking institution that we have a contract with. And he will be taking over the banking portion of our webinar. I will be speaking to kind of the relationship and how it was established with the banking institution. We'll talk a little bit about the PEO portion that I represent, and then we'll talk a little bit about the workers' comp side of things. With that being said, WorkLogic, which is actually my sister company, has been in business for about 22 years. We do have an established relationship and a great footprint in the HR world, in the PEO industry. About a year and a half ago, we decided to actually open up a division of our company that would focus directly on the cannabis. We are California-based, so obviously the push for that was the legalization of cannabis in California. We felt that we needed to actually establish a few relationships before we actually could move into that space. One obviously being a banking relationship. For those of you that are out there, you know that the cannabis industry is very much cash-based. And being a PEO and running payroll and paying taxes, that wasn't something that I wanted to be involved with. So establishing a banking relationship was vital to being able to be a part of this industry. The second part of that is obviously to get with my labor attorneys to find out any nuances that might be within the industry that might be specific for cannabis that may not apply to other companies that are in the for HR laws and so on and so forth. The last one, of course, is establishing a relationship for workers' comp. One philosophy for our company has always been that we want to be that one-stop shop. We want to be able to have our clients access everything they can potentially access for their company so they can really focus on running their business and letting us handle truly all their back-end administration. So kind of circling back with the banking relationship Rick probably, I guess, about maybe 9-10 months ago, I met Rick for the first time. This was actually an opportunity that I really didn't think was going to happen. If anybody has actually attempted to try to find banking relationships that are of this caliber, they just don't exist. And so once Rick and I had the opportunity to actually meet in person many times, we actually created a strategic partnership between each other, between their institution and ours. And so with that being said, I'm actually going to let Rick, the professional that understands banking a lot more than I ever wished to. So Rick, I'm going to let you take over and kind of explain a little bit of the relationship and the process to the clients actually come on board with you, and I'll let you talk about that.
All right, thanks, Jason. So my name is Rick Lindsey. I'm the CEO of 7 Point Financial. We are part of a $1.2 billion hedge fund, not $1 million, billion-dollar hedge fund. And so what we do is most of the hedge fund is invested in the cannabis industry. The other part of it is invested in technology, real estate, things like that. A good friend of mine is the CEO of the hedge fund, and we're the front end portion of the hedge fund. 7 Point Financial brings clients to the hedge fund, vets them for banking. So a little background, about 5 years ago, the CEO of the hedge fund came from the industry. He was an international banker, worked in Washington, D.C., moved money for the government around Afghanistan until he got shot and his Humvee unit got attacked one day. He decided he wasn't going to do that anymore. So he came back to the States, wound up taking over a large grow in the Washington area up in Tacoma. Had the same thing going on that everybody else does that we work with. They've got a lot of cash. He was building more storage vaults than he was anything for all of his cash. So he went to his friends at FinCEN and worked out what it would take to really put together a legitimate banking platform for the cannabis industry. And that started about 5 years ago. So over the past 5 years, we've got over 500 clients on the books. Last year did over $600 million in banking deposits for the cannabis industry. About 6 months ago, 7 months ago, right after we met Jason, we were taking the banking services more to the streets, basically, working with more and more companies rather than just the large pubcos, things like that the hedge fund has been working with. So we set up the system for it. We met Jason. One of the things that we're concerned about is a bank. This is high-risk banking, so we want to make sure that our clients, number one, we go through a legitimate background check with them, and I'll cover that in just a second. But the other thing is that they're doing other things besides banking legitimately, like running their HR services, running their insurance services properly, because now we're bringing this business into the mainstream. And with it being in mainstream, they need to run like legitimate companies. So some things that we experience with high-risk banking is every single transaction, when it's done properly, has to have what's called the Suspicious Activity Report, the SAR, the CTR, Cash Transaction Report when we're doing cash pickups, anti-money laundering reports, and Bank Secrecy Act reports. So everything that goes on inside of the account, the regulators want to know, and they want to have it at their fingertips. So we have to report on it. This is kind of what I call old-style banking. It's really heavy lifting on the back end. And that's the reason a lot of banks will not get into the business. One is they fear reputation. The other thing is they fear the cost of it, because it's very manpower-intensive type business. We have the most experience in the industry, probably overall, in what's really legitimately being banked out there for the cannabis industry. We're about a third of the industry right now and growing fast. This year we're expecting to do over $1 billion in banking deposits. Now with that, what are some things that you experience with high-risk banking that you don't in a normal bank? Number one is this is set up as a commercial bank account. So the business owners, they're legitimate. We know who they are. We go through very extensive background checks and underwriting process. There's actually 6 different background checks we do, including criminal background checks for the business owners. And then it goes into 2 different underwriting processes. One with us that we approve. We just say we'll take on the risk. And the other one is with the regulators saying, okay, we'll allow you to do that. So once we have that set up, we go through this extensive process. Then we get into really training them. The difference between regular banking and high-risk banking, one is we don't allow the ability to float money. A lot of people in your checking account, you've got a deposit coming in as a business owner tomorrow, but today you're writing a check for the funds aren't available. They won't be available to your deposit. It's tomorrow or the next day when that deposit's available to you. In our world, our customers initiate the transaction. The transaction gets deducted from their account, clears their account, and then goes out, like an electronic check, a wire, or an ACH. The businesses have full capabilities. They have an online portal where they can push through any transaction they want. They go online 24 hours a day, just like if they were Bank of America or Wells Fargo or anybody like that. But the background of it is where the reports get filed and then the transaction gets completed. So there's about a 24-hour delay on transactions, and that's one thing that we train them with. The other thing is, incoming and outgoing deposits. The banking industry for high risk isn't meant to be run at almost a zero balance account, right? So we have minimum deposits that we need to open the account. The minimum deposit to open the account is $100,000. For the first 90 days, we require them to keep a minimum balance of $50,000 in the account. That's so we can get to know them, and if anything goes wrong, there's money to cover it, right, if something gets hit. Or a lot of times, in the first 90 days, when an account's opened under somebody's name, there's a lot of asset sweeps going on around the country where corporations are trying to sue somebody for like back child support, something like that, tax liens, and they see them open a bank account and they lien that account. So, with our hedge fund, we help protect against that. We work with the business owners on that. We do a lot of upfront checking to make sure that doesn't happen. On a very small percentage, we'll run into some issues in the first 90 days. But after that, pretty much everything is normal. Then they can run their banking deposits. based on what the bank has seen. They can run their balances down if they need to and then run them back up. We are looking for post-revenue companies, which is what you'll be working with in the HR services, because they're already up and running. They've got employees that need your help. High-risk banking is not for a startup who will have their doors open in several months. All right. So some other things with it, besides the ACHs, electronic checks, they'll get a debit card after 30 days of running the account. We'll set them up with a debit card for their account. We provide all the online compliance oversight. All funds are FDIC insured. A lot of companies will have legacy cash. You know, we work with companies that they've been more operating legally, like California's been a long time, so they've got a lot of cash set aside or in safes and vaults stored somewhere. They want to get that into the banking system. So we work with them on having auditors come in, go through their financials, going back to the day they were first legal, decide how much money can be brought forward into the banking system, and then set up for that amount of money to be brought forward, deposited into their account, and made usable for them. Other things that we have is once we establish an account, there's no minimum or maximum amount of deposits they can make. There'll be some small banks jump in and out. I get calls every day. Hey, you know, we had set up a bank account. Now we're limited. We have to clean our accounts out at the end of every month because the bank doesn't want it on their balance sheets. Or we can't ever deposit more than $1 million in a month. So with us, once we open their account, they can deposit all they want. $1 million, $2 million, $10 million, $20 million, $30 million every month. Weekly, however much they have, there's no limit to them on that. Some other things with it is it's concierge style banking. So they have someone they can talk to all the time. There's always someone monitoring the account, making sure things are going well and keeping things ready for the regulators. Things banks don't like, they don't like regulators coming in all the time. A traditional bank will have regulators come in once or twice a year. We have regulators in a couple times a month, auditing, going through our bank, making sure everything's on the up and up, because we are in an extremely high risk industry. So with that, we keep the regulators happy, keep our clients happy, and we're growing very rapidly, providing services. With what we've done with Jason and Greenleaf and the whole family, is that we've set up special services for them, making sure the money can move between the accounts. You can get your payroll done, you can get everything done, and Jason will talk more about that. So with that, some challenges that we run across now is a lot of the banks out there, they know that cannabis companies are doing what we call shadow banking. They form a shell company and they're banking under a shell company name. We run into it every day. So they have teams at the banks. I worked in the business banking groups at Wells Fargo, B of A. They actually have teams now that are scanning accounts, looking for deposits coming in from other cannabis companies that will trigger a shutdown of an account. So if a business has, you know, We Are Weed, and that's their corporate name, and they're running a dispensary, and they're paying a vendor of theirs who supplies to the cannabis industry, but also supplies to other industries. So they're just running a normal bank account. When that payment from We Are Weed comes into their account's triggered and shut down, because now they're doing business in the cannabis industry. So we work with our businesses to make sure that we're not triggering their suppliers' bank accounts at the same time. So that's part of the checks that we go through to make sure nothing's happening, that they're not creating problems for the vendors that they do business with. And other than that, it's pretty straightforward. It's banking. There's some moving targets that come up every now and then with compliance. Regulators may want something. We constantly will be working with our business owners to get reports. We definitely get their revenue reports, their P&Ls on a quarterly, sometimes monthly basis, depending on how much money is coming through the account. So we can verify exactly what's going on, that their deposits match their sales. Right? The number one fear about doing business with cannabis is money laundering. Right now, the industry has a lot of bad money in it, a lot of illegal money in it, and the banking industry does not want that money in there. It's our job up front to be the police of that. We make sure only clean money is coming into our bank, and that way when the regulators see what's going on, they know we've got clean accounts. We're not bringing money in from illegal sources. We also work with publicly traded companies. We've got some that we're working with Jason and his team. They're out of Canada. They're coming into the U.S. They're going to be buying up businesses here in the U.S. and they have a need to get money from Canada into the U.S. legitimately in the cannabis industry. And with our hedge fund, we're able to support that and go through the time frame with it. It's not an instantaneous, hey, we just want to bring in $20 million by tomorrow. It goes through a process, but we bring it into the States legitimately so they can operate, and we probably have 30 companies doing that right now. So we can support everything from the smaller business all the way up to the publicly traded companies. And with that, I'll turn that back over to you, Jason.
So thank you, Rick, for that. I appreciate it. Can you touch upon a little bit about maybe, I know some questions that usually come up when I do these is how do you get the money into the bank and fees that might be involved that in case these brokers usually gets asked questions about that kind of stuff. Would you mind touching a little bit about that?
Sure. So to get the cash into the account, what we do is the business owner works with their banker. They'll set up a cash manifest log. They'll tag their money accordingly, bundle it up accordingly to the cash manifest log. They'll work with the bank to set up a third-party armored pickup service. The money's picked up from them with the armored service, taken to the Federal Reserve, and deposited into the account of the Federal Reserve. So we only work with certain armored services. They have to be vetted by the bank. They have to be vetted by FinCEN, and they also have to have a Federal Reserve appointment so they can actually take the money into the Federal Reserve, get it into our bank's core account, and it shows up in our customer's account in 24 to 48 hours.
Perfect. And then your bank also offers for dispensaries and stuff, merchant banking and loans too, correct?
Yeah, so merchant processing, so they can accept, if it's a dispensary, we do PIN debit processing. We actually have a solution now where they can do credit cards. Some of them think it's a little pricey, but it's not too bad for what the ability to accept a MasterCard, Visa, Discover, American Express. But typically, all dispensaries work on PIN debit because it runs through different networks than MasterCard, Visa. And we can establish that. We work with them to do that.
Perfect. And then you also do loans, I believe, right? Startup loans or growth loans?
So growth loans, once they have a history with us, the hedge fund will look at some companies for investment or lending, but we also have some groups associated with the hedge fund that we can refer them out to for lending. Lending is a touchy thing in the industry, especially a startup. A pre-revenue company trying to get startup loans is pretty much impossible right now. So they're going to mainly need an investor to get rolling. But once they're up, they're running, they have revenue. If they're looking for equipment, financing, things like that, we can support that.
Perfect. So thank you very much, Rick. And I'm sure there's going to be some questions when we conclude this that we'll circle back to that banking. In order to have access to this bank, obviously, Insuredsolutions, which has been the one that's been kind enough to set this webinar up for us, that's the access to me and access to the banking relationship. There are some supplementals and an RFP, a risk analysis, and a few other things that have been supplied to them that if they haven't already, I'm sure we'll get out to you. Once I've received all of those, one of the questions that I always need to ask is, are they interested in a banking relationship? If they are, I obviously need a really good contact number, a good email, somebody that's going to be the one to be in charge of dealing with the banking relationship, because that's not always the same person that's going to want to deal with looking at a proposal for my services also. And then I have a secured portal that I will then get all that information into, and Rick has been very good about getting back to those people immediately. From that point on, he will then create a relationship with them. They sign non-disclosures, and then he will actually explain this process in depth, give them a lot of information so they know that what they're getting into. I do know that there is an application fee that's about $2,500. and the application process, like Rick has explained, is fairly lengthy. They do have a 100% approval rating right now, which is a good thing. I think that's probably because of the due diligence that they go into this application process. And I mean, let's be honest, who's going to pony up $2,500 if they're not willing to be legit?
Exactly, and I'd like to speak on that just a second. Once we get their package in that comes through Jason, we get everything together, we meet with the business, we do a full interview with the business, we do a write-up on the company, we verify some few things on the KYC, the initial KYC that needs to be done before it goes to underwriting. Once the whole package is ready, that's when we submit it to underwriting and they submit their $2,500 application fee. If for some reason they're declined, we'll send it back to them because we do enough vetting up front where we don't really have any problems with that. So we're not in it for application fees. We actually have, our cost to open an account is a lot more than the application fee.
Very good. Thank you for that, Rick. So obviously when Rick and his team is doing their due diligence and getting the bank account opened up, the second part of this now is to take a look at the application that you guys have supplied that has been obviously sent to us through Insuredsolutions. We will then take the application, and there's two portions of it. One of them is getting all the information into my system in order to get underwriting to start working on pricing for workers' comp. The beginning part that I start with obviously is doing an evaluation of the company to create a customized proposal that suits to that particular business. I should tell you that because my company has been in business for so long, things that are very important to us is that we are very, very workers' comp, very HR centric. A lot of our sister companies that we've always dealt business with, and maybe in a lot of you guys that are out there, you've always been, your first foot forward has always been comp, and ours has always been HR. We are based in California, and any of those you that are out there, you know California is its own beast when it comes to HR. So it was always a great way for us to be able to establish value with our clients in creating an ironclad HR team. We really like to get to know our clients. If those of you that know PEOs out there, we tend to end up being an overpriced payroll company once we end up getting people on board. If we end up being a workers' comp provider, we're constantly at renewal scrambling around and trying to find them cheaper rates and them switching constantly. Our idea is to be really involved with them and have a strategic plan that takes a look at where they were, where they are now, and where they want to be. And in the cannabis industry, that's really important because a lot of these guys, even though they may be business-minded, they don't necessarily know business on our end. They're money people. They know how to build a good structure. And then you've also got those people that are involved in the cannabis industry that don't have a good business mind, but they have a specific patent on a seed or whatever it may be that has allowed them to be able to grow to where they're at. And our job is to be able to fix all that for them. And we actually created a program, my sales reps that I've always trained, we call them business consultants, not sales reps. And the reason for that is because of that philosophy of where have you been, where are you at, and where you're going. Once they come on board, they actually meet with what we have is called our Horizon team. And these people are ones that actually go out there and take everything that's happened in that process and now build a program that is going to be around for a long time. So the clients are always expecting something new that's going to be happening in their life, whether it be on-site training, whether it be HR manuals, whether it be compliance training, whatever it may be, there's always something coming in the horizon. The great part about that is that this is creating that stickiness that we're wanting to do. The first part of that stickiness is the banking relationship. It can be very difficult for them to leave us if they know that there is a connection between us and the bank. The next part of it is creating that relationship and value that we're building for those particular clients and knowing that, gosh, if I end up leaving just because maybe there's a cheaper workers' comp out there, at the end of the day, there's not a lot of options for them in comp to begin with. But it's eventually, over time, going to be the fact that there's going to be more markets that are going to open up. And we want to be that forefront in saying, look, there's a lot of things that are out there for you, but we want to be that provider. We want to make sure that we're in bed with you for a really long time. And the only way to do that is to create the value that we provide. And that's really what we've based our company off for so many years, which is why we've had such success in the HR space. So even though we're calling ourselves Greenleaf HR, know that the HR team, again, like I mentioned before, is powered by what logic, and the client will know that up front. Going through your proposal process, obviously, again, all that communication needs to come through Insured Solutions, but in many times, I'm actually the one that will actually reach out to the client and help negotiate that deal. There's nobody better to talk about our product and build the value to hold profits in any way possible than obviously the people that are going to be servicing the actual client. And that will never be forced upon you guys. It's something that is always an option for you. And obviously there may be some more questions that go into that, but again, my company is a one-stop shop for workers' comp, safety, benefits, loss mitigation, risk management, payroll. We also have our own proprietary software. So we've been building the software, which is our HRIS system, for probably the last 8 or 9 years. This is now the proprietary software that is their back-end administration for onboarding. It is case management. It literally does everything that they're going to actually need to have. And the great thing about it, too, is because we write our own code, we actually have the ability of growing into things, like looking at the fact of creating bridges between seed to sale software and our software. There's a lot of things that we have in the horizon that we're planning on doing for the cannabis industry. Just like we've done with many other industries that we do business with, this particular type of industry has little things that are out there that we can potentially implement that as long as we see that it's value for the whole community of the cannabis industry, it's something we definitely can build within our software, which is super exciting. Obviously, those things are not going to happen overnight, but they're definitely exciting things happening in the future. I guess this takes us finally to the final part of what we have, which is our workers' comp side of things. So I mentioned that as I'm working on the proposal, and obviously as Rick and his team are working on getting the banking relationship going, I have another set of team members that are going to be working on the underwriting part. Like you guys may or may not know, about February of last year, we created some partnerships with other PEOs throughout the nation that did have a lot of exposure to workers' comp, and again, that was never one of our strong points. And thanks to these amazing relationships we have with our sister companies, we now are able to have that power that we've been wanting for a long time to establish exclusive relationships with certain entities for doing supplementals in many different industries, and one of them happens to be cannabis. We are connected to a national workers' comp program, and we've had great success with it. I probably should tell you, again, I'm not here to teach you something you don't already know, that you already know, but for those of you that don't understand it, is that the workers' comp industry, it doesn't change much with cannabis. A florist has the same workers' comp code as a florist, the same thing as a farmer, or whatever that may be. The comp codes stay exactly the same. The only difference is they get rated up substantially when you're dealing with, when the words cannabis get put into it. We've had a few exclusions that have come down since we've started this program. One of them is that no company that we do business with is allowed to have armored guards on their actual people. This is something that if that is the case, they're going to have to actually sub that out, and there's a lot of companies out there that are doing that now. So that would definitely have to be something that would be rectified before we could ever bring them on board. Another thing is they won't do courier services. A kind of a fad right now with a lot of your dispensaries, I know at least in California it's this way, is they don't want to have their front-facing dispensary retail store anymore. They're actually going to more of an internet-based. So you get online, you actually order whatever the product is that you're looking for, and a young man or woman, much like an Uber, will show up to your house and actually deliver said product. It's very high risk. They're just not interested in doing any part of that, and even some of them are collecting cash, and that would definitely not be anything they're interested in. And the final one is farm labor. It's just too risky of a business that's out there, and it's not an appetite that they're looking for. Other than that, we really haven't anything else that has come down. Again, this is a new program. Cannabis is new to this world in workers' comp, so there's going to be a lot of changes, I'm sure. I've tried to be very good about making sure that I let all my sister companies know the changes as they happen. So I just ask you to be patient. This isn't going to be one of those programs that you're going to throw an application at and expect me to be able to bind the next day. It's just not going to happen. We just do not have enough time to be able to get it done through underwriting. So it's important that when you do send your applications in, that every I is dotted and every T is crossed. Otherwise, I will have to kick it back. They're being just like Rick's team, it's very important that all the information's there because the auditing process for a while, until we all get used to being in this industry, is going to be very strict. So now I'd like to have the opportunity, unless Rick, you'd like to add anything else that have come out of that about the banking relationship or our relationship, I'd like to be able to ask anybody if they have any questions that they would like to be able to send through.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is I didn't talk about the scalability of what we do. So, we're legal in all the states where cannabis is legal. So as you're working all over the country, if cannabis is legal in that state, we can support it. We work with all the state weregulators, doing the proper filing of transactions and everything that needs to be done. So we're a nationally scalable solution, and we're the only one out there doing what we do.
Cool. And which is very exciting for us to be a part of that. And I'm happy that we've created this partnership. I think that for the people that are out there that haven't gotten involved in this industry, I think they're going to find once they get out there and start working on this, they're going to realize that this is a trifecta that just does not exist. To be able to have a banking solution of this scale that's federally insured, an established PEO, there are plenty of PEOs out there that are calling themselves a PEO solution that really popped up with the cannabis industry. And so having the longevity that we have in the business is not something that exists, and your large companies like ADP and all these other big giants are not wanting to be a part of this industry yet. So this is an exciting opportunity for each and every one of you that are out there that want to get involved in it. Yeah. Any questions of anybody? I mean, obviously you can always shoot something to whoever is the one that turns you on to this webinar, and they can shoot me emails over, which I can then get to Rick if it's a banking question. You also can set up private it's private webinars if you would like, as long as you go through Insuredsolutions and get that all set up. I would be happy to speak one-on-one with anybody if you want to take this to a step further. So I'll give it a few minutes if you have any questions come through. Otherwise, we will conclude the webinar. So it doesn't look like anybody's. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I would say one thing when you're talking about other companies trying to jump in the game, we've had calls where payroll companies have tried to jump in the game, and they had their bank accounts shut down because they're bringing money in from cannabis companies, they're doing other payroll services, they were mixing money, they got caught, right? And that's one thing about what Jason's team and his company has done is they've set this up legitimately. They bank with us. We know what they're doing. It's set up specifically for this industry outside of what they're doing. There's no mixing of in different industries in what they're doing with the cannabis. So they're keeping it clean. That's why we've all flew in, the CEO of the hedge fund, myself, Jason, everybody, and we pow out about this for a long time to make this happen the right way. So businesses that you support, that you bring to us, are handled properly.
Right. That's a very good point. I mean, we believe in this solution so much that we're actually banking with the actual banking institution ourselves to make the transition for ACHing and paying of taxes and payroll a lot smoother. It'd be a lot easier for them to transfer the money from their own bank into that bank account for us to actually run payroll and stuff through versus trying to have it come to our bank. And then the last thing we need is for them to actually shut our account down knowing that it came from somewhere potentially they found out from Canada. So we really try to think of every point possible in this to make it as clean for your clients as possible and for them too. So, I mean, unless Rick, you've got anything else to add, I think this would be a good opportunity to probably conclude and let you guys kind of think about what we've talked about today. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for taking time out of your day to listen to what we have to say, and I look forward to doing business with each and every one of you. So, thank you, Rick, for your time.
Thank you. You're welcome.
All right. Have a good day, everybody.